Kiwi FM
102.2 Auckland. The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Jeff Dudas from underwatertimes.com.
Yes, the editor of Underwater Times. He joins us in Miami. Jeff, hello to you.
How you doing, Wammo?
I'm very well, thanks very much. Very well, very rested. Spent a lot of time in the water, to be fair, actually. It's starting to warm up here in New Zealand.
Super. We just came off a Thanksgiving holiday over here.
Oh, yeah, did that go well?
Very good.
Yep. No, did you eat lots?
A lot of turkey and dressing and various other
Nice.
sweets.
All right, I think it's a great holiday. We have nothing quite like that here in New Zealand. Christmas is probably the closest to it, but I think it's a great idea.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, let's get on to the stories. The first story involving a dog and a journey and a sea lion.
Yeah, this is sort of every dog owner's nightmare, and this has happened to me in the past, where you're walking a dog and the dog gets off the leash and it starts running away. Well, this happened to a guy who was walking his dog on a beach in South Australia, and there was a sea lion just off the shore, and the dog starts chasing the sea lion into the ocean and swimming after the sea lion, and essentially just keeps on going. The sea lion takes him out to sea, and it goes so far where the owner of the dog can't see the dog. He basically went over the horizon, and so they called the surf rescue in, and they went out to try to find this dog, and sure enough, he was about 4 kilometers offshore and still chasing the sea lion and sort of nuzzling up against the sea lion. And the sea lion was just sort of, rolling around in the water doing what sea lions do, having a blast. But this dog was, I think they said it was an hour out in the ocean swimming. And so they rescued the dog. So it was a happy ending and brought him back in. And so everything was back to normal. The owner, of course, was quite relieved.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, that's a long way to go, dog paddling 4 kilometres. Well, don't they say, though, that some dogs are some kind of distant relation to sea lions?
Well, if you look at the bones, they're sort of the same, but I'm not quite sure how close they are. So
perhaps they recognised a cousin or something out there.
But it could be. I always think about this too. As the dog's kind of lucky there wasn't a shark, because usually they're attracted to that kind of splashing and such. And so I think the dog's quite lucky on a couple of accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I'm talking about long journeys. There's been some research into great whites and finding out how far they travel. Yeah,
and this is sort of a couple different scientific endeavors have come together to figure out where the sharks came from that are the great white sharks that are in the Mediterranean. And as it turns out, they are related to sharks in Australia. It's been known that they've tagged sharks off the west coast of Australia and put on satellite tags, so they know they visit the southeast coast of Africa. And they've also done recent DNA tests on sharks caught in the Mediterranean, and it sort of amazed the scientists when they looked at the results that they matched up perfectly with the sharks in Australia. So they knew that they're sort of distinct relatives. And they figured out that 450,000 years ago, pregnant great whites were going back and forth sort of the way they do now, but when they got to the southern tip of Australia, they got caught up in this current that whipped them around and put them on the west coast of Australia. And so they started going up that coast, and they wanted to head east, and it's sort of the natural to go back home to head east, and they couldn't do it until they got to the Straits of Gibraltar, and they went in there. And they basically, gave birth inside the Mediterranean. And the way sharks are, they always return to where they gave birth. So they basically established their own population there. And for 450,000 years, they've been there. And so, it's kind of interesting that a wrong turn where you end up and such.
Quite smart, though, really, when you think about it. When some great animals in the ocean migrate to cold places like Antarctica, whereas they want to go to the Mediterranean.
Exactly, and evidently they found, they established there and found their own sort of food sources and such, and quite successful. So, it's interesting too. They said that they couldn't get back out because of the way the Mediterranean is shaped with all the peninsulas and currents and such. It's kind of like a lobster pot. Once you swim in, you can't get out. So, they're there forever now.
There you go. Well, our final story involves some very smart fish as well. who protect themselves from parasites.
Yeah, and this is roundhead parrotfish, and this is something I've seen. If you go on night dives and you run across a parrotfish, and then they sleep on the reef, and they have this sort of, gelatinous mass around them, and it kind of looks like a net, and no one ever really knew why. I mean, I'd heard this story, too, that protects them from predators and sharks and eels and such that roam the reefs at night. So scientists started scratching their head and trying to figure this one out. And so what they've done, they figured out, is they actually, put this mass around them, this little net around them to protect themselves from parasites, these blood-sucking parasites that come out at night. And they're much like mosquitoes. They suck your blood, and they can transmit diseases between fish. And so, they put these fish in tanks, the scientists, and in one tank they let them excrete this little net around them, and the other one they left alone, and they pulled off the net. And so then they put in these parasites, and they figured out, hey, this is actually a good protection from the parasites.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and so they're looking at this too. They really haven't figured out what's the actual mechanism. Is it just a physical barrier? Because this stuff is like jelly, and they excrete it from this gland by their gills, and they sort of it's almost like a sleeping blanket. It's like it covers their whole body except their mouth. And so it protects them quite well, but they don't know if it's just a physical barrier or some sort of chemical warfare or what else, maybe an odor. So they're going to try to figure that out next.
And then they'll just shake it off in the morning.
Yeah, in the morning they suck it back in, actually. So it's a gland, and it takes actually quite a long time. It takes about an hour for them to excrete this stuff, and they suck it back up in the morning and keep on going.
Imagine if we could do that, create our own bed.
Yeah, that would be kind of strange, but I'll stick with DEET.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Those stories and more you'll find at underwatertimes.com. Jeff Dudas joining us there in